Okay,
And you are.
so I'd like to get started this evening. Um, this is our, I want to say quarterly. It's one of four meetings we may or may not have this year. It's the first one. And tonight our topic is really conservation ranching. And we have a panel and we have a presentation. I'm going to introduce the panelists to you and then we'll do the presentation and then we'll take your questions. Can somebody out there in Zoom land tell me that they can hear and see, please? Knock, knock.
Yes, we can hear and see.
Great, super. Thank you. All right. I'm going to introduce first Sarah Fulton Smith, Dr. Sarah Fulton Smith. Sarah is with American Farmland Trust. She's the Texas director. And I have a personal connection both with Sarah and with American Farmland Trust. We're working toward a partnership with our ranch and American Farmland Trust. And I've known Sarah since she was 5. Our second panelist tonight is Ernest Dunson. He's with NRCS, and he's our conservation ecologist for the Texas district. Is that your title?
I'm the district conservationist for Wise County.
Wise County. Okay, Wise County District Conservationist. And we also have a personal relationship with Ernest because we have done projects together on our ranch with him as well. So I wasn't biased when I picked the panelists. And then our presentation for tonight is Chantalle Vincent. She's with the National Audubon Society. And you're a range ecologist or? Yeah. Okay. Chantalle, can I turn it over to you? Sure. Here you go.
Righty. Okay. I'm now in the camera. All right. So, hi. Yeah, my name is Chantalle Vincent. Michelle said I am a range ecologist with the Audubon Society's Conservation Ranching Program, and here to just tell you all a little bit about what we do. Oh, 1 second. If I can get it to move. Okay. So a little bit of context, the Audubon Society has its roots in the late 1890s when a group of young women got together to try to protect waterfowl in the face of overhunting, largely for use in women's fashion. It was big at the time to wear an entire taxidermied bird on your hat. And obviously this was creating a great struggle for our waterfowl who were just being completely overwhelmed with this hunting. From there, we now operate in 11 countries, stretching from Canada to Chile. We operate 55 centers and sanctuaries that provide habitat and education to the public. And we have over 500 community and college chapters, all of which operate independently but are associated with the National Society and share our same mission and goal in bird conservation. So we do a huge range of different projects, including community science, such as the Christmas bird count, where people get together in their area and do a survey of birds every December and January, to coastal conservation work, doing restoration and habitat work on the Gulf, doing advocacy following oil spills, and then also work in urban areas, such as promoting plants for birds, so a native plant program, trying to work with people to do bird-friendly buildings to try and prevent window strikes, and also doing the Lights Out network to improve nocturnal migration. Now, as I said, though, I am specifically with the Conservation Ranching Program. So we are a certification market-based program. We partner with farmers and ranchers in order to enhance biodiversity, productivity, and resilience of our grassland ecosystems, both for the sake of our birds and also for the many people who depend on them, from the business owners to the local community to the consumers who ultimately buy the beef products that come out of those rangelands. So we are a fairly new program, began in 2017 with our first certified ranch in Missouri. And from there, we are now operating in 20 Western states. We're constantly expanding our capacity. We now have new team members in the Southwest, up in the Pacific Northwest. We've certified around 150 ranches, and that covers about 4 million acres. So we're less than 10 years old and been growing pretty fast. In Texas specifically, this map is actually about a year old. This is marking all the certified ranches we have. A lot of these yellow circles that were upcoming certifications at the time the map was made have now been certified. So we have almost 500,000 acres certified here in Texas. And I believe we have 27 ranches. So we're growing pretty fast here in Texas as well, pretty much at a similar rate to the rest of the country, maybe better. And the reason that Audubon wanted to specifically create a grassland bird program, and specifically one that works with private landowners, especially in states like Texas, a lot of our grasslands and a lot of our lands in general are privately owned. In Texas, it's roughly 96% of land that is held by private landowners. So if we want to do large-scale conservation, we do have to bring people in on the private scale. And we desperately need to do large-scale conservation. Birds have been declining rapidly in North America. In the past 50 years, we've lost roughly 3 billion birds. So that is 1 in 4 breeding birds lost from the United States and Canada over a 50-year period. So we're seeing a pretty alarming decline in birds in general, and grassland birds, unfortunately, have been hit the hardest. So they're in that mustard color, as you can see, with a 53% decline over that time period. And that's due to a number of different factors. Obviously, we've lost grassland habitat to urban expansion, to agricultural development, where either it's being turned into row crops or being used for pasture. In Texas, we have a huge problem with tree and shrub encroachment. The suppression of the historic fire regime has led to a lot of mesquite or juniper taking over our grasslands, as well as the use of pesticide, obviously damaging our insect populations, which cascades to damaging our bird populations. So we're facing a massive problem with our bird populations overall, and grassland birds, being the birds that survive off of one of the most imperiled ecosystems in the world, are obviously having a tougher time than most. So in order to tackle that, we have our certification program, and these are its 3 pillars. So the first is creating an adaptive habitat management plan for each ranch we work with. The second is looking at the overall health and welfare of the cattle that exist on that land. And then the third is looking at the general environmental sustainability and making sure that we're protecting every aspect of the environment and not just not ignoring certain aspects for others. So that first part, as I mentioned, is creating an adaptive plan that really aims to solve the problems and goals of each individual rancher based on that site's history of agricultural usage, based off of the soil types and ecological types. We try and take all of that into account to help guide management practices. But the big overarching focus that we have is creating these cycles of disturbance and recovery that help preserve grasslands historically. One of the main tools we have for that is using rotational grazing, and every rancher is going to do this differently. We don't come in and say how often people have to move their cattle or what herd size they have, but it's just a focus on making sure that you're having an appropriate stocking rate and you're moving the cattle over the landscape in a way that can create this kind of patchwork quilt of habitat and help support a variety of grassland birds. So in areas that have been more recently grazed, you're going to have more areas of bare ground, you're going to have shorter grasses, maybe more annual forbs, and over time, as that pasture is allowed to rest, you're going to have those tall grasses come back, the perennial forbs, and as you leave it even longer, you might eventually have the shrubs move back in. And all of these habitats are incredibly important if you want to have a true diversity of grassland birds. For instance, if you want to have this horned lark coming into your land, they need those open areas. They're going to avoid anything that's brushier, and they're just going to thrive in that kind of bare ground patches that come from more recent grazing. However, if you want to support populations of Henslow's sparrow, you're going to need those areas that have been resting for longer and have allowed to become kind of weedier, where the tall grasses have come back. You have a few scattered shrubs, and you have some of those taller perennial forbs. So you really need that kind of array, and cattle are just an excellent tool. We like to think of cattle not as like some kind of hindrance where people worry about overgrazing and that can be a concern, but they can be a really incredible tool for habitat restoration and conservation if we allow them to and use them properly. There are, of course, other ways that we can create these disturbances as well, and different ranchers will pair different types of disturbance with rotational grazing as is best for them, and that can include things like prescribed burn or shallow disking, both of which can be really great for removing shrub cover, helping deal with different invasive species, or helping to reinvigorate the herbaceous community. However, we like to make sure that we're doing this strategically in a way that isn't going to inadvertently increase bird mortality. So we ask to limit disturbances during the breeding season from March to September. Because the last thing you want when you're doing conservation work is to accidentally trap a bunch of nesting birds in a prescribed burn. So if you are going to do these things, we like to make sure that people are thinking about ways that the birds can escape, still having that kind of patchwork and making sure there are backup nesting sites available, so that we're still providing bird habitat even when we're creating these disturbances. And then lastly, just a major part of having an appropriate habitat for birds is going to be having the native plants that best suit them. So in general, having a diversity of native plants versus non-native monoculture is going to provide more suitable nesting structure, as well as having more high quality foods. Not just our native plants like big blue stem going to be better quality food than a non-native such as King Ranch blue stem, but you're also more likely to have a diverse ecosystem when you have it, and you can provide for food over the long term. And you're also more likely to have a more abundant insect population living in that kind of diverse ecosystem, which not just great for the insects, but of course, birds survive on those insects as well as the grains from the grasses. So then to quickly touch on the second prong of our program, a lot of what we talk about with our general animal health for our cattle isn't necessarily promoting conservation, but because this is a certification-based program, it's aimed at drawing in consumers who are willing to maybe pay a higher price or pay to specifically support ranchers who are doing good work. We want to make sure that we're still we're providing an ethical product. The kind of consumer who's interested in bird conservation generally wants to make sure the animal that they're consuming had as good of a life as possible. So this is partially for the sake of the animal, who is, like I said, a conservation tool. They deserve to be treated well, but also for the appeal to the consumers. So our ranchers do humane, gentle cattle handling. They ensure that the animal isn't emaciated or overweight. We're also no antibiotics or growth promoter hormone program. And then we want these cattle to be grass-fed and grass-finished, so they're not confined in a feedlot. And this aspect is not just for the animals' own good, but also for the sake of grassland. We don't want to see grasslands converted into feedlots or converted into corn or soy fields. We want to see them continue to be a diverse grassland. And then the last aspect of our program, as I said, is just overall making sure our environment is being taken care of. And that includes protecting our riparian areas by not allowing unlimited access to them from the cattle to try and prevent erosion on the riverbanks. We don't want pollution from fecal content or sedimentation in our waterways, to asking our landowners to be strategic when thinking about non-native or invasive species removal. So instead of doing large amounts of broadcast spraying, we try and think about different ways we can either use prescribed burning, different grazing management strategies, disking, or other disturbance methods instead of doing a big broadcast spray, which can obviously damage non-target species as well as target ones. You know, we recognize that there are some times where your field is entirely taken over by mesquite, and maybe the most strategic and best for the environment option is to do spraying. But we try and, you know, have ranchers think about the root cause and other solutions. You know, if your field is taken over by ragweed, that could be an issue with overgrazing versus something that you just want to try and treat and say you're fixing with a broadcast spray. And then lastly, it's really important to us to try and support our insect diversity. Again, that's for the sake of the insects, but also the sake of all the birds that survive off of them. So that includes having ranchers not use ivermectin, which is an antiparasitic commonly used as a dewormer in cattle. However, unlike other similar products, this is excreted in the dung rather than in the urine, and has a huge impact, especially on our dung beetle populations. They will go to that dung, and it can interfere with female reproduction as well as larval development and kind of cause a collapse of our dung beetle populations. And those are really the first step into breaking down manure and turning it into soil organic matter and improving our soil health. And then it can also, once it is broken down, it can bind to soil particles. And when that soil is eroded, it can enter our water systems as well and end up impacting our aquatic invertebrates. So ivermectin can just have huge kind of hidden impacts on some of our smaller creatures in our environment. And then similarly, we ask our ranchers not to use neonicotinoids, which are another antiparasitic. So they can end up kind of clinging to corn or soy or other seeds, as well as impacting non-target insects, especially bees. And both of those things are unfortunately consumed by birds and can eventually accumulate in bird systems over time and have neurotoxic effects as well as leading to death. So they can have pretty severe indirect and direct impacts on our bird populations. And then let me move that little thing. And then just the last aspect of thinking about protecting our entire environment, as simple as it seems, it's really important to keep some type of vegetation on the ground as much as possible throughout the year. And as simple as it might kind of seem, the concept of just having plants on the ground, it has so many diverse impacts for the environment. For instance, it provides thermal cover, almost like a blanket, to keep the soil at an appropriate temperature, both in the winter and in the summer. And that's really going to be important for anything living in the soil. Obviously, you don't want to cook them or freeze them. And it has further soil health benefits. Even when plants look dead to us, those root systems are still very much actively alive and helping bring nutrients down into the soil, helping with water infiltration, helping break up compaction, interacting with soil microbial communities. So there's very much still a living component to the plants throughout the year that we might not necessarily see, and it's important to preserve those both in the dormant season in the winter when we're not really seeing any life in our plants, and also to ensure we're not overgrazing during the growing season and having an impact on those root systems. Obviously, also, these plants at all times of year providing habitat for our insect life, for our small mammals, for our birds, and ensuring that they have a continued breeding for for the insects, continued protection from predators for all of those animals, foraging habitat, all of those things are ongoing throughout the year. And then lastly, like I said, even though all these plants to us might look dead, those active root systems are actually where a majority of new growth are going to come up from in the growing season. A very small percentage comes from new seeds. So ensuring that we have those active, healthy root systems is what's going to allow our system to rebound every growing season. So encouraging a healthy root system is going to be really key to ongoing ecosystem resilience and ensuring that year after year we're having good growth of our herbaceous community. And so kind of thrown a lot of our kind of lofty goals and pillars at y'all. And so we do want to make sure that we're actually accomplishing all of what we're setting out to and making sure that our protocols are actually having an impact on the land. To do that, we do monitoring of our bird populations, vegetation, and soil on our ranches just to make sure that we're actually achieving anything. So obviously, as a bird conservation organization, the birds are kind of number one on our mind. So every 2 to 3 years during the breeding season, we go out to our ranches and do monitoring. And our science team has developed what they call the Bird Friendliness Index, or BFI. And that is just a number that helps us track change over time so that we can see improvement over the course of one ranch and also throughout the entire program, and kind of have one digit that we can put that all together into. And so that BFI takes into account the overall abundance, so the general number of birds, the diversity, so the number of different species and functional diversity, and the resilience, so the ability to recover from disturbance, as well as conservation status to take into account if we have any endangered or threatened bird species. So just looking at the first 35 ranches that were certified in the beginning of the program from 2016 to 2019, in the data, they saw a 36% increase in just bird abundance, so just the number of birds that they were seeing on those ranches. They also saw a 19% increase in functional diversity, which is a measure of pretty much the different foraging types of birds. So seeing that we're supporting birds that eat seeds and birds that eat insects and birds that eat small mammals or birds that eat all of the above. So we know that we're not just creating a habitat that supports one type of bird. And then looking at that bird friendliness index, they saw a 63% increase in that value over the first 7 years of the program, or roughly an 8% annual increase every year. And then concurrently with doing our bird monitoring, we also do vegetation monitoring. And this is just to get an idea of the vegetation composition and diversity that we're seeing on our lands, making sure that we're getting decent ground cover, and promoting a vegetation community that's going to support our birds as well as support our cattle on these ranches. And then lastly, but potentially most importantly, getting an idea of what's going on with our soil, really measuring all these different soil aspects gives such a good idea of how our practices are actually improving the ranch, not just for the now, but for the future. So looking at things like soil carbon, which is a terrific measure of soil organic matter, since carbon is roughly 50% of organic matter. Looking at bulk density, which is a great measure of compaction. Looking at total nitrogen, which is a really important nutrient for plant growth. Looking at water infiltration, the rate at which water can enter the soil. And ultimately, all of these are also going to be linked as well. So having a roughly 1% increase in soil organic matter can lead to the soil taking in an extra 25,000 gallons a year. So just having an understanding of these different soil, this different soil data can give a real understanding of how much more resilient your ranch is becoming, because I mean, I'm sure a lot of people know that drought or flash flooding are both major issues in Texas, and the soil having the ability to incorporate that water and not lose all of it to erosion, as well as ensuring that there's sufficient water being stored in the soil year after year is going to be it's going to be essential pretty much to supporting a plant community every year. And I think this also really helps sum up why we need not just plants on the ground, but also a diverse plant community, because that's going to offer you something, offer you something that a monoculture really can't. You can kind of see in this diagram 4 different plants with the 4 different all have 4 different ways of putting out roots. And all of those different root systems are going to interact with the soil microbial communities differently. They're going to break up compaction differently. They're going to bring water and nutrients down into different parts of the soil. So having this kind of diverse plant community has really big impacts on your below ground communities. It's also key that obviously having those, say, breaking up compaction is going to influence your plant community as well. If you have a very compacted soil, it really impacts your plant recruitment and plant growth, as well as if you have soil that is lacking in nutrients or lacking in water, you're going to suffer for your plant growth. So it is this very cyclical relationship where you need this diverse, healthy plant community in order to promote healthy soil. But you also need healthy soil in order to have this diverse plant community. So as you grow and increase both of those, you're going to really see the increased impact on your environment, and you can see greater forage potential as well as greater ecosystem resilience, and as a result, greater bird habitat. So I really want to emphasize that when we're conserving for birds, we're not just conserving for birds. You know, obviously birds, as I said, are in a decline. They do need help. But when we're trying to help them, we're really supporting the entire environment along the way. Birds are often thought of as an indicator species. So when you see birds in decline, that is a sign that the entire environment is in decline in some way. They're being impacted by habitat loss, by the loss of plant diversity, by the loss of insects, loss of small mammals, a decline in water or air quality. All of these things are going to impact them. And so when you're therefore conserving for them in turn, you need to support all of these different aspects. And as you start to see the birds rebound, you're going to need all of these other aspects to rebound in turn. So using birds kind of as this charismatic front person that everyone cares about and loves seeing is also going to in turn help us protect our grasshopper populations or our water quality or our soil health. So they really all work together and come together, and to protect one, we're protecting all of them. So hopefully when people see our Audubon bird-friendly land certification on a ranch gate or on a stake, what we hope that it represents to them are these bird-friendly habitats that we're creating across working lands, which are being supported by evidence drawn from biological and soil monitoring. As such, they're empowering consumers to kind of vote with their wallet and give money to producers who are doing really great work, and as such are having their good practices rewarded by potentially receiving higher prices from consumers who are willing to pay to support these good practices and support all the work our ranchers are putting in. I know I've talked a lot about kind of larger scale practices. You know, we tend to work with ranches that are a few hundred acres. I personally don't have a few hundred acres. A lot of people don't. But even if you just have a small balcony or 5 acres or 10 acres, there are still steps you can take that hopefully you can draw information from our protocols and implement. So ivermectin is found in dog and cat medications as well. It can enter the ecosystem just as easily from dog or cat feces as it can from cattle dung. So avoiding it in your everyday life for your pets can be just as important as avoiding it for cattle. Same neonicotinoids can be found in household or pet insecticide products and can have those same impacts on the environment, on harming other insects that are non-target species and eventually accumulating in birds. Just planting native plants, whether you're putting it out on a planter on your balcony or you have a 10-acre property and you want to do a diverse patch of structural diversity with tall plants and short plants and forbs, that can be just as important for birds as having a 1,000-acre ranch to go run around on. And then one last practice that I didn't talk about is just having escape ramps in ponds or pools. We implement those with our ranchers in their water troughs, but having ways to prevent wildlife from drowning is incredibly beneficial. I'm sure no one wants to fish a possum out of their pool anyways. So having a way that they can get out and reduce some of that mortality is very important. So that is my presentation. That is my name and email. I know we're going to do the panel, but if you end up thinking of any other questions or have anything that you want to talk to me about after this, you are more than welcome to contact me.
So everybody take a big screenshot here, so you'll have a shot.
I have my cards as well, but
Oh, super.
Big card.
okay.
But you'll distribute cards. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so Chantalle, if you will take a seat, you could sit down first, so you can take your pick. And if Sarah, you'll come up and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do, and then you can take a seat.
There it is. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Chantalle. That was really helpful and informative. Kate mentioned, my name is Sarah Fulton Smith. I am the Texas Director with American Farmland Trust. I've been with AFT for the last 3 years, starting our Texas program here. I'll tell you guys a little bit more about AFT in my next breath. I'm a 7th generation Texan. I've known Kate and Jeroen most of my life, so thanks for inviting me. I'm a soil ecologist by training, have run my own farm and operation, and I attempt to influence my parents' management on their ranch in Wise County, which is, an ongoing conversation. I really appreciate Chantalle's presentation. I think that any programs that help land stewards, ranchers, farmers, be rewarded for the ecosystem services and other benefits that they can produce on their land through good practices are really important. And they're really critical to our ability to keep our working lands working and our native lands good habitat. So kudos. And I'd be happy to tell you guys maybe later more about some of the programs that we have at AFT, but I just want to briefly introduce the organization. So American Farmland Trust has been around since the 80s. We were founded as an organization where our leaders identified the need to bridge conservation organizations and agricultural organizations at a time when those two entities didn't really work together and were really perceived to be at odds from each other. And our founders really recognized the need to bring those two audiences together to really make good progress on our ag lands and reduce the environmental impacts from our farming lands. So our mission is to save the land that sustains us. And we do that by focusing on 3 pillars. The first one is to protect farmland. So we are a land trust. We do hold agricultural easements. And the second is to promote sound farming practices, similar to the bird-friendly ranching that Chantalle was mentioning. And the third is to keep farmers on the land. So we have lots of practices and programs that help farmers be more profitable, more sustainable, more resilient, like business planning, succession planning, all of the hard conversations that they'd like to have or don't like to have to keep their operations going. We have a wide variety of programs that fall under all three of those pillars, and those look very different in every state. And so my job for the last 3 years has been to figure out what that looks like in the context of Texas. And I'm getting close, but we're still working on it. I think I'll stop there for now.
Thank you, Sarah. Ernest.
Yeah. Hi, guys. My name is Ernest Dunson. I am the district conservationist with the NRCS out of Wise County, Texas. So basically my job entails I work with all the landowners in Wise County and surrounding areas to better their ranch by addressing certain resource concerns. We work with various programs. A lot of them support not just birds, but mammals and other wildlife species as well. Usually what we end up doing to support wildlife also helps benefit livestock grazers as well. So that's kind of where we focus. We try to find a happy medium between all of them in order to make it work. But the programs are nationwide. Since we are a federal agency, usually what everybody is applying for is the Environmental Quality Incentive Program or the Conservation Stewardship Program. And again, most of those support a lot of the same things that these other programs that you've heard already talked about support. We were first started back in the 1930s during the Dust Bowl, as you can imagine, to help address soil erosion, particularly on crop fields to keep the land from blowing away. So a lot of our focus when it comes to our programs deal a lot with soil erosion, and that's where we try to focus a lot of our efforts in. But surprisingly, a lot of erosion that does take place occurs on rangeland. In Wise County, we have the most erosive soils in the state of Texas. So 90% of what I do is addressing soil erosion, and a lot of that deals with we need a deep-rooted plant to get on that soil in order to hold it in place, and that not just benefits the land, the cow, but also the birds as well. So looking forward to all y'all's questions.
Great. Nice, thank you. I just want to hammer that erosion a little bit. On our ranch, it was really played out when we bought it. And you can walk down any of the perimeter fences and you're walking 1.5 to 2 feet below the fence line. And you think about that foot of soil that has blown away. So this erosion question is really critical. I don't know if, do we have questions online already? All right, so I have some questions and I'm gonna ask the same question of each of you. Yes.
Do you want to turn the camera? Stop
Oh,
share.
yeah.
So no,
I think what we want to do is.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about hearing, however, I think we can make it where it's visible.
Now you just need.
Hi, there's our panel. All right, Ernest is driving, I'm just reacting.
Stop share though, so that it fills up
Oh,
the screen.
okay, let's try stop share and see if the camera still works. Well, it doesn't fill up the screen, but it's there. Might have to switch. Oh my gosh.
You can just talk to them. Folks that are actually on Zoom.
Yes, that's,
Oh, okay.
Let's just go ahead.
Yeah.
and You can.
okay, so, and I will look for some confirmation from the Zoom community that they can hear our panelists when you answer, because you all have, in contrast to me, rather low voices. So I had to listen. Okay, so it's a question of size, okay? So you talked about ranches and then you talked about balconies. So that's an extreme. So who is your target? Who are you in business to help? Who are you focused on? Can you give us an idea of the size?
Yeah, I'll try to speak loud. So the actual certification, we work with ranchers who are around 500 acres, give or take a few. So we definitely are focused on larger ranch land, but as I was saying, more about the balcony sizes. Our protocols can be applied to smaller scale, but the certification itself is roughly 500 acres now.
Clear, and that's very nice. Are there other programs within the Audubon Society that address small landowners?
Not at the moment. So the conservation ranching program, like I said, is fairly new. And one of the big expenses that comes with it, that I didn't mention before, is that we work with a third-party auditor to verify and have an independent verification that our ranchers are actually doing what we say they're doing. And so that's kind of one of our big limiting expenses right now of why we're not working with smaller landowners, is just because we have to pay that auditor the same amount regardless of the size of the property. So maybe in the future.
So- Sorry. That's excellent information. I had some more questions about monitoring,
Yeah.
and I really appreciated that you're measuring things, you're not just looking at them. Sarah, size.
So at American Farmland Trust, I would say, depending on the program, we work with farmers and ranchers of all sizes. I didn't mention specifically our Texas Grazing Network. This is really kind of our flagship program in Texas right now, where we recruit mentors, so ranchers that are already doing regenerative grazing, and we pair them with ranchers that are interested in adopting these practices. So we find that ranchers really learn better, and farmers learn best from their peers. They would rather hear it from somebody who's been through it and done it than from a PhD ecologist who hasn't run cattle on, 500 acres. So within our Texas Grazing Network, we have ranches as large as 4,000 acres enrolled, and we have ranches as small as 80 acres. We have folks that have just moved out to the country and bought their first cows and want to do it, right from the beginning. And we have ranchers that are doing this now for the 5th or 6th generation, and they're looking at what's next, and they're next in line to take over management, and they want to start to influence the practices on their properties. So it's a really wide variety, and as long as we can find a mentor that is an appropriate match for that rancher's goals, then we are more than happy to have people in that program.
Okay, thank you. Size, Ernest?
Well, with the NRCS, we don't really have a size requirement.
Mhm.
We've done contracts on backyards, believe it or not. The one stipulation is you have to be some type of agricultural producer, so producing some type of commodity crop, whether it be vegetables that you're selling to a local restaurant. You have to be producing something
Honey.
agriculturally. Honey,
For example.
honey, yes, pollinators. There's actually a guy in Denton that he went to all of the surrounding neighbors, got about 10 or 15 acres total with the surrounding neighbors' backyards, and did a contract for pollinator habitat, and he has a beehive in his backyard. So we work on all sorts of sizes. It just depends. So it can be a half-acre plot to 200,000 acres that I used to work on in West Texas.
And when you say you work on them, tell us what you actually do.
So I meet with landowners to look at resource concerns on their land. So based on their goals for their operation, what do they want to do? And then I have to see if that can be paired with a practice that we offer through one of our programs. So pollinator habitat, we're all interested in saving the monarchs and the honeybees. It's what it's all
Critical.
about. It's a critical thing. So we do have practices that support that. One can be a wildlife habitat planting, so you can support not just the bees and the pollinators, but your mammals as well. Or there's conservation cover, where we focus more heavily on the wildflower mix to support the honeybees and pollinators.
And when you, okay, so that's your role to interface, and then the support part, what happens there?
So the support aspect of it is, so all these programs, they're not grants. Keep that in mind, they're not grants. It's a conservation incentive payment. So some of these are paid on by a linear foot, some are paid on by an acre, depending on how small the operation is, it can be paid on by the square foot. So we offer certain payments to install this practice. The landowner is responsible for installing the practice. We don't care how much it cost you, we don't care what you paid. We have a certain payment, this is what we pay you, and that's it.
Okay, so, okay, that is clear, and I appreciate that. Chantalle gave us a lovely slide that showed what they measure and how they measure it. So for me, that answered the question is, how do you define success? What is your yardstick or your benchmark? How do you know where you're going? I'm gonna go right back to you and say, how do you measure success?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It really depends on the practice that's being performed. So you're aware that we can go out and plant grass. Well, we need a lot of things to make sure,
Rain.
especially native grass is one of the hardest things to establish. It's usually slow to come up, and when it does, that first year is very essential for, is it going to make a stand of grass? It's even more difficult when we're taking out another species that's highly productive, such as coastal Bermuda. It's very hard to get rid of. It loves disturbance, it loves fire, and it can tolerate chemical like no one cares. So measuring the success of something is kind of takes time. With native plantings, I've had some where they installed it December, we had really good frost, a couple, inches of snow, and then the spring, we got really good rain. Come May, we had little blue stem that was 2.5 foot tall, Indian grass was all over the place, and it looked phenomenal. That's success to us. But I've also had some where they did the exact same thing. We didn't get the certain amount of rain in the spring, but 4 years later, I went out to that same property, and you cannot tell it was the same property that I worked on. So some of it's a time aspect. It's hard to tell when something's a failure when it comes to native grasses. Now, improved grasses, that's completely different, because some of those benefit our native bird species like quail, preferring bunch grass species that we do establish. But measuring it is kind of up in the air when it comes to certain things.
So I want to separate two things right here, and I really appreciate where you're going with that, because measuring it is an outcome-based perspective, which is yours. But the payment is for getting the work done.
Correct.
All right, so
Correct.
the work happens, Ernest comes out, looks at it and sees that you did what you said you were gonna do. And then at the appropriate moment, the money shows up.
Usually, yeah, with grass plantings, it's always, oh, you've planted that grass, we come out, we measure that area that was planted, and we pay you. We don't wait for it to establish. That's not how that works. So the payment automatically comes whenever the grass is planted.
So I really appreciate that distinction. There's a
Yeah, there's a,
financial aspect, and then there's how do you define success, and that's. So most of the people on the call are native prairie aficionados, and they understand that young prairies are ugly. And they also understand that it takes a long time to rebuild what we destroy so readily. So everyone understands that. Sarah, how do you measure success?
So our current program is pretty new and we're still figuring some of this out. I would say some of it is achieving milestones, like for the individual land steward that we work with. Our mentors work with them first to establish goals. So having a set of goals established, I would say, is one measure of success. And then from there, we want them to create a grazing management plan. And that's going to look different based on every operation. A very detailed grazing management plan might be a little overwhelming to a new producer. And so sometimes it's very simple. Sometimes it's a really detailed holistic management, like whole deal thing. But just having the grazing management plan in place is one milestone to check off. And then we also provide incentive payments for completion of some of those milestones. But we are, as an organization, in the process of establishing more in-depth, like both social, economic, and ecological impacts to measure. And we're not yet doing that on a project scale, but we're hoping to pilot some of that in Texas. So more details on what that might look like. But that's going to be on the social side, measuring behavior change. So work practices installed based on the training and the financial incentives that the participant received. And on the economic side, that might be like, did you use fewer inputs, or, did you have a higher income based on adopting new practices, or being able to market your product with, regenerative grazing on your label or whatever. And then on the ecological side, it would be a lot of the things that Chantalle mentioned: increased soil health, increased water infiltration, increased biodiversity. So one of the things that's challenging, especially from a nonprofit perspective, is that actual measurement of outcomes is very expensive and very hard to get funded. And so that's one of our, that's one of our challenges.
Chantalle, you mentioned adaptive planning or your adaptive management plan. Can you explain the term adaptive?
Sure. I mean, I guess when I'm using it, I'm not necessarily going with the, I'm sure there's some kind of copyrighted adaptive management or something.
It's a word, we can all
Yeah,
interpret it.
yeah. Kind of idea, but I think when we're thinking adaptive is we don't go onto a ranch and tell a rancher, you're gonna move your cattle 3 times a week. You need paddocks that are 10 acres and you need to use hot wire and you need to have this many animal units per acre, you know? Each one of our ranches has had a very different history of use. Some of them were cotton fields, some of them were pine timber plantations, some of them have been native prairie the entire time. That might not be realistic, but you know, some of them have been treated better than others, or more productive than others. They have soil that's incredibly productive, or soil that has been incredibly beaten down and is very eroded. So we go on to the ranches and have to recognize that everyone's starting at a very different place, both ecologically, based on their own knowledge. You know, some ranchers have been doing regenerative rotational grazing for 30 years. Some people, their parents are aging and they're coming back to the ranch after having to have a totally different career, and they're looking for a new way to do it. So they haven't been doing this for very long. So it really is creating a plan that works for our particular rancher, for their environment, for the priority birds that are specifically in that area. And just working with what we have is how I see adaptive.
Okay. So that is actually not what I understood, so I'm glad I asked the question. Every plan gets changed over
Yeah,
time.
oh, and that as well, yeah.
Okay, that's where I'm.
Yeah, sorry, yes,
Yeah.
that too, you know, the best laid plans and all of
Yes.
that. Every time, you know, it might be that our rancher comes into the program saying, I don't want to use herbicide ever. And then 2 years later, they need to use herbicide for a problem, or they want to use the pasture for upland birds program that Texas Parks and Wildlife has that tends to use large amounts of herbicide, and they need that for funding. So we recognize that the plan changes. The plan is submitted to our third-party auditor, but can be updated, and we write it as a 3-year plan. So we re-update it every 3 years. And yeah,
Okay.
plans change all the time. Yeah.
Plans change all the time. Okay. Any questions online? John, please.
Ernest, this one is more your line at this point here, but including you as well, Chantalle here. You mentioned for the birds that the diversity of habitat is very important. Ernest, I've noticed that Johnson grass, KR bluestem, a couple 3 others, old world bluestems, tend to take over in overgrazed areas and create monocultures, and they're famous for that. They've been documented, so on and so forth there, and that's directly against your bird diversity. And their seeds persist in the soil profile for a long time. So I'm thinking that that adds a complication to a plow, disc, and seed native plants sort of a thing, because the seeds of old world bluestems are still there, popping up and competing with your natives that you just put down. Do you have at this point an established program or protocol of some kind that you can at least tell some of the listening ranchers here that might be interested that you can do, so you can expect some kind of success, some kind of long-term progress towards the Audubon diversity thing?
Well, actually, yes. So I've actually done this already, not so much with Johnson grass, but with Bermuda. It kind of reacts the same way, right? It's hard to get rid of. It's super productive. Johnson grass takes over everything, just like KR does. KR is going to be a little bit harder to treat, but with Johnson grass, especially if we're going to come back with a highly diverse mix of native grasses, we're going to come in and do, and this is where the herbicide comes in. It's going to be a heavy rate dose of Roundup. That's the easiest way to put it. Most likely you're going to have to spray it twice. We help you out with the first one to kind of help get it out. You want that grass to be in its full growth pattern, highly productive state. So that way when you spray it and it coats it and it takes everything down the roots and it kills it. You're not going to get rid of it 100% the first year. It's not going to happen. It's going to take consecutive years. When you see it pop up, that's where your spot treatment comes into play, and that's considered maintenance on the rancher's part to go out and do that. KR, good luck. It's I hate to say it, but because it reacts to chemical well. You can spray it and most likely you might kill that one plant. The problem is it produces so much seed that the second you kill that plant and you go out there and you disturb that soil, come the following year, it's coming back. That's just the nature of that beast. You're never gonna fully get rid of it when it comes to a rangeland planting scenario. Johnson grass, on the other hand,
Yeah.
you can start knocking that out pretty simply, but I don't think I've seen a single one where we've been successful at knocking back KR with their stem.
So keep watching. I have a private patch of KR that I'm working on.
Okay.
I'm 1 year
No, we
in,
got a test plot.
and we got a test plot.
I want to talk to both y'all about those test plots privately later.
Okay. Sure, it's interesting. I could use all the help I can get. You're in.
Chantalle had this very nice slide with short grass, medium grass, and a little brushy grass, and the different birds that live there. That's nice. And it matches this image of the prairie where you have the glowing grass forever and a million buffaloes in the distance, but we don't live there. So what we have is grassland, natural mostly, and then draws where it's lots of trees. How do those trees come into your diversity ecological system?
Yeah, I mean, I think trees are just another part of that diversity. You know, I think it's kind of the rule of, you know, you don't want to overindulge in any one thing. You don't want a landscape that's entirely tall, thick bunch grasses, because then you're not supporting everything. You don't want something that's entirely a woodland or shrubland. But those trees do have a role in the ecosystem. They might provide homes for you know, birds that tend to live on the edges of grasslands. They provide homes for generalists. They're often providing shade for riparian areas, which is important for anything living in the waterways. So I think trees do generally have a role. A lot of the landscape was in this area, maybe like an oak savanna, or, you know, a mixed mots of trees with tall grasses. So it is very, I guess you could say, natural for this landscape to have areas of woodlands. It's just not what it was historically to have an entire field mesquite, you know, so it is all just a balance.
A monoculture of trees, just like a monoculture of Bermuda grass, is not
Yeah.
desirable for
Exactly.
biodiversity. Other questions?
Okay, I have a question for Chantalle. So if someone were in the ranching program, and they run a cow-calf operation and they take their cattle to the local livestock market, how does that play into the program if you have no way to prove that the cattle are not gonna go to a slaughterhouse or right away, or they're not gonna go to a feedlot right away because you're just selling them at the livestock market as either a calf or cow-calf pair or pregnant?
Yeah, so technically the program is you're certifying the land, you know, so if the cow goes to a place that isn't Audubon certified, like the certification doesn't travel with that cow, but we're trying to find ways to connect our ranchers more. So if someone was, say, selling a calf, they could sell directly to another Audubon certified rancher. So we set up a website that we're piloting here in Texas, that part of it is a forum for all of our certified ranchers to talk to each other and see those kinds of questions of, I'm selling 3 calves, anyone interested in buying? We also recently got Thousand Hills Limited, which is a distributor. They have a cooperative of, I believe, 15 ranches, and all of their ranches recently got certified in the last year. And so all of their products have the Audubon seal on them. And so the person who runs that cooperative, especially with the cattle shortage right now, is looking to connect with other ranchers in the program and, you know, look at other distribution lines that potentially ranchers could sell to him directly rather than to local stockyards. So we're trying to create different avenues that our ranchers can work together, that if the cattle is being sold off the land, it can remain in the Audubon certified sphere, I guess.
Okay.
Well, and also the rancher has a choice. If that market exists, you can go to the sale and get less, or you could sell to the market perhaps and get more. Yes, Sarah.
Just to add on that, I think in general, the traceability of beef is very challenging in the market. Like, it's very easy to follow the calf to the slaughterhouse, but not the calf to the steak that you buy at the grocery store. And so when it's not a direct to consumer product, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to establish traceability. So even for ranchers that we work with that are selling their product, they don't get a premium at the sale, right? Because there's no way for their product, even if it was regeneratively grazed its entire life, to be sold at Sprouts as a regenerative steak, right? And so there are some individual suppliers that are starting to tackle that, like Walmart and H-E-B are working directly with producers to try to sell those specific products. But there's a lot of companies that are, or a few companies that are trying to solve this traceability piece so that you can trace the cow from birth to the supermarket. So hopefully in the next 5 years, there'll be, you know, more of an ability to differentiate what you're purchasing and how it was treated.
Yeah, but then if you're in the program, then you are certified as, like, I mean, not an organic ranch, but you meet all of these qualifications. So when you sell the cattle, you know, at least if you sold it to a local person or into this network, they would know you're abiding by things
Yeah.
under the program.
Yeah, at the very least, you know, if you wanted to sell under, I know like Superior Livestock, those auctions, we don't have anything specific of like this is Audubon certified, but I know they have things that are like this is grass-fed, antibiotic-free, and you know, Audubon has all of those aspects to it. But you know, maybe one day we would have one a stamp on Superior or
Yeah, I was
something
trying to
like
wrap my
that.
head around, like, if you're
Yeah.
not in an actual organic.
So I have a thought more than anything else. In talking with Sarah recently, she mentioned this mentoring component of American Farmland Trust. And what caught my ear was she mentioned a mentor who is a member of NPAT and whom we all know, and that's Julie Maddox. And I thought that if I wanted more proof of the synergy between what we're doing and what you're doing, there it was. I mean, she's even potentially a mentor for me and Jeroen. So it could get very personal. And, you know, her story is so, it was so wonderful. I don't remember how many of us were there at the Dixon Water Foundation when she was in that panel discussion and talked about 13 cows. But for it to come full circle now, and she's a mentor, she was, you know, describing her journey to get profitability out of her little operation. So that's a short period of time to become successful.
And Julie is so inspiring because she really used cows as the tool for the prairie restoration, right? And one of the things that I think is nice about our program is that we have a very diverse set of mentors. So they're not all native prairie restorers, right? But we have enough diversity that they all have different expertise to share with each other. So we have one mentor that is very passionate about producing a grass finished product and doing that at scale. And so if Julie happened to be working with somebody that really wanted to get, you know, that body condition perfect on a grass finished product, she could ask this other guy questions. You know, we have others that are really passionate and really have figured out the direct to consumer marketing piece. And so they can also learn from each other to help their land stewards even more. And yeah, but Julie's a great example.
Well,
I have a practical question. So, Chantalle mentioned that one of the ways to make progress is not use ivermectin. And since I was planning to warm the cattle day after tomorrow, I wonder where I can learn about alternatives.
The alternatives we suggest are moxidectin or cydectin because both of those are excreted in the urine and don't have the same impacts on insect life as when they be excreted in the feces.
But if you talked to Holistic Management International, they would
Say you
tell
don't
you
need to.
to rotate your cattle, every 3 days so that you interrupt the life cycle. And that's not realistic for everyone. Yeah, and I'm like, well, I have horses. I'm always gonna have horses. So even if I'm grazing my sheep rotationally and not needing to worm them, my horse will die if I don't.
Yeah,
And
call it.
so in that case, we can find and get rid of the feces before we turn them back out, which is also not always realistic.
So like, I
Depends
guess
on where
if
you
you're
are.
using ivermectin because the animal is sick and you're using it as an antibiotic and you're not doing it on a regular basis.
Ivermectin is not an
Or not, that's
antibiotic.
Not ivermectin, an antibiotic.
Using an
You're
antibiotic.
Using an antibiotic, 'cause you had mentioned like antibiotics. I know my father, he used to do a lot of antibiotics and steroids, and then now we're not doing any of it, like the cattle are pretty much on their own, but if they get sick, then we give them antibiotics, so would that be a problem if you're just doing it every now and then and not
Yeah,
more
so that,
frequently?
that's in line with our program of, obviously we don't want an animal to suffer unnecessarily. It would just have to be sort of taken off the market, as you'd have to like make a note, keep the antibiotic records, and it couldn't be sold necessarily to Thousand Hills or one of our distributors as
If you've ever used an antibiotic?
just
or-
on that animal, so it
Oh.
has to be taken out of the Audubon certified. It can still be on the land and all of that. It would just have to be marked, and you make sure that it's not being sold. If you were either selling directly or selling.
You would sell that one across the scale.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So what, how would you treat them if they're sick?
Oh, I
What's
mean,
something that could be treated with antibiotics
you, like I said, you can still use the antibiotic. It would just have to be.
that you couldn't sell that?
Yeah, exactly. So it's more of like, using the antibiotics as necessary versus using them as like a growth promoter or using them in the feed or anything.
Good question. Other questions?
So, about diversity in the landscape. So I sell hay, and of course I could try to sell native hay, but the horses may like it, but it's the people who give me the dollar bills, and they see that stuff and go like, yuck, what are you trying to do now? So, but is there a role for landscape where you have fertilized or sprayed hay fields together with native grasses? I know in our hay fields we have like flocks of meadowlarks, and they like it just fine.
Yeah, so for our program, it's pretty much, I think, in the protocols, like 50% of the property has to be being grazed, and you can't convert native grassland to a non-native.
Okay.
So it's trying to slow any type of conversion or grassland loss.
Sounds very reasonable.
Yeah, but we know that people, have multiple sources of revenue, and the last thing we wanna do is take a rancher who's doing great work and put them out of business because we took away one of their revenue and have that land sold off to be turned into a mall or something. So that's totally contrary to what we're doing. So yeah, we know that people have alternate revenue streams and are doing a lot with their land. It's just about, if you can convert some land to native grasses, that's great, do those projects over time, but there's wiggle room on not 100% of the property has to be in pasture.
Thank you.
Thank you. So our executive director is online, and she mentions that we have another NPAT member with a protected prairie with us, Carl Abel, who is maybe one of your mentors
Yeah.
as well. Sarah's nodding, so thank you very much. Ask Amber. Okay, so I think the questions are slowing. No more discussion.
I want to say one thing, so it's very important, the mentoring, the education, and NRCS has been doing this for 30 years for our place and has been very beneficial. It's not just funding that counts for people, it's the guidance, make people enthusiastic.
So the sub note I would add to that is you really want to, you really want to go around the block and talk to all the conservation organizations and find the fit for, that share your values and your goals. And, but also just what you learn in quote, in one place might not apply in another one. And some other organization or its members will have a different perspective. And I think just like the diversity that we look for in our land and landscape, that same diversity of thought when we're approaching how we care for that landscape is really important, because you don't know what you don't know until somebody tells you.
And I can, if you don't mind, I can expand on that a little bit. So the NRCS, we partner with a lot of different agencies, whether it's interagency cooperation amongst other federal agencies like the Forest Service. Texas Parks and Wildlife is another one that we partner with a lot, but Quails and Pheasant Forever. So we actually offer a program that's worked by them, it's the Grassland Restoration Incentive Program. And, you know, if y'all hadn't gotten into the program y'all are in already, that would have been the next one I would have taken y'all to. So knowing your local district conservationist or local conservation planner, whether it's a rangeland specialist or a soil conservationist, these guys know the other agencies in that area. So if our programs don't suit you, we can usually direct you to somebody that says, hey, I know they do this, just give them a call. And that's what we're here for. A lot of people say, oh, you know, don't partner with the government. We'll take your land and tell you what you can and cannot do. That's not true. We're there for the land. We're there to help you. We're just a resource. Come use us. And it's simple as picking up a phone call and asking us, hey, can you come look at something? And that's what our agency is supposed to be about, conservation technical assistance.
Thank you. So any,
There's another message that's coming out.
thank you. It's from Michelle, who says absolutely.
Go down.
No, go down. So I can only read part of this. Hello. I'd like this window to be bigger. Or to have some ability to scroll down. This is, here we go.
Oh, there, yeah.
So this is from Nancy Boating. This has been so interesting. I'm not a landowner or rancher, but we are trying to put more natives pollinators in our yard. And I can't see the rest of this message. I think there is more. Aha, in our yard within city and HOA guidelines. Thank you for letting us know about these programs. Well, thank you for that comment. And thank you all. It's very helpful. I learned a lot. I like the measurement part. And thank you. Okay, guys, I'm going to shut this down. Good night. If it will let me. Boom. There's a delay on